My name is Sam Otten, and with me is Jason Book. And in this video, we're going to be talking about Convergence, the big event from DC Comics that has now concluded. So we had the 8-part major series with also a Convergence Zero getting started. A bunch of tie-ins, which I did not read all of them. I got some summaries of them from the DC radio podcast, but I also read quite a few of them. But the main book has now wrapped up in a pretty big, profound way at the end, so that's what we'll be talking about. So, Jason, I'll kick it over to you first. What did you make of the Convergence event? But I guess, we can talk about where it left things as well. What do you think about the ending of Convergence?
I don't know. I kind of thought it's kind of like what I said before, that I think it was kind of like a way for them to be able to write stories that, brought back the multiverse. And that part of it I like, but I don't really think the getting there was as good as it could have been. I just thought that changing the artists, every issue and things like that, and the guy's writing wasn't always the strongest, didn't make for a very strong crossover to me. I like where it ends up story-wise. The multiverse is always cool, and it's neat to have those possibilities in a DC story, but I don't necessarily think it needed to be this to get there.
Yeah, I'm pretty much on board with you where it's like, okay, this event was an interesting event. It got to an interesting place, and we can talk more about that in a second, kind of where this leaves things in the future. But the details of how it actually got there just was not strong, and at points it was just kind of pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So I do writing in my job, like a lot of writing, and to me, like the big challenge of writing is, okay, you have an idea. Lots of people have ideas, and lots of people usually have lots of ideas. But what's really hard about writing is to actually put it into detail and to actually flesh it all out. And that's where, the great writers separate themselves from lots of other people that just have ideas. And I feel like the Jeff King, he had this idea, he pitched it to DC. They're like, yes, that's going to help us, with this master plan of where we want to get the universe. But when Jeff King went to actually put in the details of like, okay, you actually need to write panels and scenes and you need to write dialogue, that stuff just did not work in so many of the issues. There were spots where it started to pick up, but there were so much of it was like, oh man, the details of it were just not clean.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And it didn't feel like, to me, like involving enough characters to be something that's taking place on such a huge level of an event for DC. It seemed to focus a lot on the Earth 2 characters, and I thought that was definitely a downfall of the story as well.
Yeah, I saw an interview with Jeff Smith, and he was saying that the Earth 2 stuff right before Convergence, was a big inspiration for him, and he wanted to really build from that. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of risky, because, I know that Earth 2 was semi-successful, but you still are not going to have, hundreds of thousands of people aware of that or anything. You probably had 20 or 30,000 people that were actually aware of what was happening in Earth 2 right before this.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's kind of a risky move to tie it so much to Earth 2.
Yeah, I would agree for sure.
Now, I think there were some nice moments with the Dick Grayson from Earth 2.
Mm-hmm.
So there was like a real emotional scene early on with his family and stuff. I think it was like issue 2, the start of issue 2.
Right.
And that, you had to wait till issue 8, but that did actually have a nice closure at the end, I thought. So that was one moment where the Dick Grayson storyline had some nice moments, but it was not woven in a masterful way throughout the arc.
No.
So a lot of it was just so clunky. And even so the big thing with Demos, it's like, okay, Demos was a huge part of this event, and I'm not really sure why he was. He kind of wasn't there at the beginning. It was Brainiac at the beginning and Talos. Then Demos comes in, but then Demos exits, and he's not at the end either. So it's kind of like they just almost had Demos as filler. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I would have to agree as well. I thought Brainiac was a good enough villain for the whole thing, really, and then obviously the other character as well.
Yeah, I was kind of down on issue 0, and we talked about this in a previous video, issue 0 with Brainiac, but then I'm kind of like, well, what's really going on? Because we get this Brainiac setup, but then he's gone for so much of it.
Yeah.
And now at the end, I feel like Brainiac should have just been around for more of it, or he should have been a bigger player through all of it.
Yeah, I thought the other character...
He's so big at the end.
Yeah, the other character was kind of like a Brainiac anyways. Yeah, it was a little bit vague. And I don't know, just to get back to the multiverse, there's so many cooler ways they could have done it. I was just thinking, they always had that Candor story in Superman. It's like, well, what if Brainiac was like collecting, worlds and like, that's what they had to go fight him to recreate the multiverse, like that would have been so much cooler, I think.
Yeah, or even you could have kept it something close to Jeff King's idea with Brainiac and Talos and this stuff,
Yeah.
but just kept your eye more on the ball of Brainiac and Talos and stuff,
Yes. Yeah.
and then just been better in the execution. I know it's easier said than done, but just the dialogue and the actual, rising tension and building up a scene, just to actually just do that more artfully and more craftily.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, I will say on the positive side, throughout the 2 months, I actually found myself really enjoying going to the comic shop and looking forward to the next ones, especially because of the tie-ins, actually.
Yeah.
I read a lot of the Superman tie-ins. Some of those were really good. The Superman one was really good. I actually really enjoyed the Action Comics one where they had the Red Sun, Moscow, which had some really good stuff with like Lex Luthor
Nice.
and Joseph Stalin.
Wow.
Booster Gold is actually a pretty important one. If you're trying to really understand Convergence, you need to pick up the Booster Gold tie-ins.
Right.
So I actually found myself really liking a lot of the event, but still very disappointed in the execution of the main line.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it says something a lot about an event if we're enjoying the tie-ins more than the main book. It's not supposed to be that way at all with a good event. So, it's kind of like they just need an excuse to tell some kind of Elseworldy type stories. And, restoring the multiverse is great and stuff, but I don't think they needed to do all this to get to that. Hopefully the stories we get after are going to be a lot better.
So, big spoilers if you haven't already told, but let's talk more about the ending. So, you mentioned multiverse. Some people are calling it the Omniverse now.
Yeah.
Because they've actually reversed even the first Crisis on Infinite Earths. So, like, what do you make just overall of kind of where DC has left things?
Well,
where it's kind of like everything exists, even stuff that kind of got collapsed in previous crises.
Yeah, I wasn't reading every little bit of this crossover because I really did find myself not enjoying it, but I did read the last issue, and what they kind of made it sound like was that they had to go back and straighten some things out in the first crisis to fix something. So it's kind of like it made the multiverse come back, but I'm a little lost on exactly the ramifications of some of that. Like the characters that originally died in the first crisis didn't die, right?
It's like they did die, but then they didn't die, and they had to go back and sacrifice themselves. But this time they were sacrificing themselves not for the original crisis, but they were sacrificing themselves to prevent the original crisis.
Weird.
So that there was not the collapsing of the universes into kind of more like singular universe.
Strange.
So the way that I took it was they kind of went back and changed it a bit. It wasn't shown. It all kind of happened off screen, so to speak. But they prevented the first crisis from happening, which means all the worlds before Crisis on Infinite Earths are actually still exist somewhere, and that's why people are calling it even like the Omniverse. Because now it seems like, the way I've interpreted it, stuff even before Crisis are still fair game, and then all of these worlds after Crisis are fair game, and I think it's because DC Comics wants to just tell their teams, you can write a story in any of these that you want, just go for the story that you want to tell.
Right.
So it seems like they're kind of just saying everything is fair play. That's how I'm taking it.
Yeah, which is cool. I think the getting there wasn't great, and if you're gonna mess with like continuity in DC, I wouldn't touch something that's like regarded as one of the best crossovers ever, like Crisis. I think they should have kind of left that alone. I understand what they're doing and trying to get there, but don't mess with such an iconic storyline.
Yeah. So, all right, well, we'll have to see what we are picking up in now Divergence, which is what they're calling kind of this era after Convergence, where they're picking up new stories and bringing in some new books. So I've got a few that I'm going to be picking up, and I'm not sure if you're going to be following any of those, but we'll have to see where this all leads. We're at an interesting place now, but I'm going to have to reread this and see if I can get anything else out of it, but I just feel like Jeff Smith maybe had a good idea and just couldn't really pull it off.
Yeah, Jeff King. I mean, like
Jeff King, sorry.
He was. I think he worked on Heroes and things like that, right? Or a certain TV show.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, several TV shows.
Yeah, and it's a lot different writing for TV than it is for comics. Probably a lot more characters in these books. Over 75 years of history of the DC universe, and yeah, I think he might have bitten off a little bit more than he can chew. But the books that I was reading before, I like the cool changes, like in Superman and Batman, so I'll definitely stick with those.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, thanks for talking with me about it.
Yay, anytime.